What if all satellites fell to Earth at once? Let's say that, somehow, every artificial satellite orbiting Earth suddenly lost all orbital velocity and started falling straight down. Not over the course of days or weeks, but all at once. Over 6,500 active and defunct satellites, space debris, and a few leftover rocket stages, everything that humanity has ever launched into orbit, decides to come home. What would happen? First, let's get something out of the way. Satellites aren't just floating above us like light bulbs hanging from the sky. Most satellites orbit at speeds of around 28,000 kilometers per hour, or roughly 8 kilometers per second. That speed is what keeps them up there. They're not suspended, they're constantly falling toward Earth, but their sideways motion keeps missing the planet. If that sideways motion vanished, gravity would take over instantly. And the fall would begin. Low Earth orbit, LEO, satellites, where the majority of communication and imaging satellites reside, would hit first. They'd begin streaking into the atmosphere within minutes. These satellites are located around 200 to 2,000 kilometers above Earth, which, at terminal re-entry speeds, means they'd start burning up in the sky within 10 to 30 minutes. To observers on the ground, it would look like the greatest meteor shower in human history, except much lower, much hotter, and much more dangerous. Imagine thousands of fiery trails slashing across the sky, some breaking up, some glowing blue, white, or green, depending on their composition. But here's the catch: most small satellites would disintegrate completely before they ever reached the ground. Tiny CubeSats, older comms satellites, and even the Hubble Space Telescope would become fireballs, then ash, long before impact. But not everything burns up. Some of the larger satellites, like the International Space Station, yes, that 420-ton behemoth with solar wings wider than a football field, would partially survive re-entry. Chunks of aluminum, titanium, and composite materials would make it to the surface, crashing down at hundreds of kilometers per hour. Now multiply that by dozens of large satellites like Iridium Next units, Starlink batches, Russian GLONASS modules, GPS satellites, and decommissioned military systems. What's worse, you can't aim falling satellites. They're not guided re-entries. So fragments would hit randomly across the planet. Most would fall into oceans, simply because oceans cover 70% of the Earth. But not all. Some pieces would crash into cities. Imagine a refrigerator-sized hunk of satellite plowing into a suburb at Mach 1. It wouldn't just dent your roof. It would obliterate a house. And with thousands of satellites, even with odds favoring remote areas, some would land in populated zones. Human casualties? Definitely possible, even likely. Satellite re-entries already happen from time to time, and we've just been lucky so far. Meanwhile, up in the air, silence. With no satellites, everything goes dark. GPS? Gone. Planes can't navigate, delivery trucks lose their routes, Uber drivers are lost forever. Telecommunications? Majorly disrupted. Satellite phones die. Live TV vanishes. International financial transactions reliant on satellite time syncing? Delayed or scrambled. Weather forecasting becomes nearly blind, no more satellite imagery, no more early hurricane warnings. Even things you don't think of as space stuff get hit. Many financial systems, like stock markets, use satellite time for microsecond accuracy. Some banks sync transactions through GPS clocks. Agriculture loses satellite-driven precision farming. Shipping and aviation are suddenly on their own. And then there's the military. Most defense systems rely heavily on satellites, reconnaissance, targeting, early warning systems, encrypted communication. Lose that, and you're looking at an instant global security blackout. No country knows what the others are doing. Tensions rise. Trust evaporates. Within an hour of the fall, space agencies around the world would be scrambling to assess damage. Emergency services would be swamped by both physical impacts and sudden technological blackouts. Skies would remain eerily streaked with vapor trails and smoke. It would feel like a low-key apocalypse, not the kind with zombies, but the kind where your phone is useless, planes are grounded, and a charred satellite chunk is embedded in your backyard. In the longer term, the world would begin to realize just how much we've come to depend on space infrastructure. Every nation would be in a rush to relaunch essential satellites, but that's not easy. Building a new global satellite network from scratch would take years, if not decades. And you can't launch new satellites overnight, not with the precision, funding, and rocket availability required. Then there's the junk. A satellite burnup might seem like a clean slate, but not everything vaporizes. Thousands of kilograms of twisted, partially melted metal would now be scattered around the planet. Not to mention the potential contamination if older satellites with nuclear components or toxic fuel tanks survive re-entry. Oddly enough, astronomers might feel the tiniest bit of joy. The skies would suddenly be clear, no satellites streaking across telescope images, no Starlink constellations photobombing deep sky exposures. Just for a brief moment, the night sky would look the way it did in 1955. But then again, nobody could tweet about it. And while the sky might seem quieter, down here on Earth we'd be dealing with the biggest communications crash in modern history. Global recovery would depend not only on rebuilding space infrastructure, but also on redesigning our entire civilization to be more resilient, because this disaster, however unlikely, would show us just how fragile our tether to space really is. So, could all satellites fall at once? Not naturally. This scenario would require something deeply unnatural, like a rogue AI disabling orbital motion, or a freak quantum event, or a secret satellite kill switch that no one told us about. Let's hope it stays science fiction. Because if it ever does happen, you won't be able to Google why. Subscribe for more interesting